Agatha Raisin and the appearance of the lost witness. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's Miss Marple mystery. I'm Jane, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for another captivating tale. Before we dive in, I'd love to get to know you a little better. What's one hobby or passion that brings you joy? Are you into baking, painting, gardening, or perhaps something completely unexpected? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe. It will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Chapter 1. A Whisper in the Village. Agatha Raisin stepped off the early morning bus. Her coat collar turned up against a crisp autumn breeze. The familiar scent of damp leaves and wood smoke welcomed her back to Carsely, a village that seemed unchanged in her brief absence, at least at first glance. Yet, as she walked along the narrow, cobbled streets toward her cottage, there was an undercurrent of something different, something unspoken that made her sharp, grey eyes narrow slightly. Villagers lingered at windows, glancing her way and quickly averting their gaze, whispering behind fluttering curtains. A sense of anticipation, or was it fear, hung quietly in the air, almost tangible. Passing the bakery, she caught the faint aroma of fresh scones and yeast, a comfort she had missed. Mrs. Tufnell, the baker, waved from behind the counter, but her smile seemed forced, almost hesitant. Agatha nodded politely, her mind already turning over the subtle signals. There was gossip here, something meant to be hushed, but impossible to hide entirely. Her curiosity, ever sharp, flared like a candle lit in a dark room. The village had a story today, and she intended to unravel it, piece by piece. Further along, in the narrow lane leading to the village green, Agatha noticed a window shutter that had been clumsily closed moments before. A shadow darted inside as her boots echoed against the stones, leaving a trail of quiet questions in their wake. A black cat, sleek and watchful, crossed her path and disappeared into the hedgerow with a faint swish, as if leading her somewhere, or warning her off. Agatha allowed herself a tiny, knowing smile. Nothing escaped her notice for long, and every small observation was a thread, waiting to be followed. She paused outside the village hall, where a notice board displayed the usual assortment of announcements, church services, bake sales, and the weekly yoga class. But tucked in the corner, almost as if it were hiding itself, was a hastily pinned scrap of paper, witness to old crime claims information. See Parish Council. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, urgent. Agatha felt her pulse quicken, a delicious shiver of anticipation running down her spine. She read it again, silently, savouring the quiet thrill that always accompanied the hint of a puzzle. Crossing the green, she exchanged brief greetings with a handful of neighbours, each reaction a subtle performance. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes flickered away as she murmured about the newcomer in town. Mr. Pennyweather nodded stiffly, his lips pressing into a thin line as if resisting a comment he desperately wanted to make. Even the children, who often ran up to her with boisterous chatter, seemed subdued, their giggles carefully muffled behind small hands. Something had shifted in the rhythm of village life, and Agatha, perceptive as ever, was cataloguing it all. By the time she reached her own gate, the faint hum of whispered conversations followed her, just out of earshot. She stepped inside and closed the door with deliberate care, pausing for a moment to survey the garden. Leaves rustled softly in the wind, a squirrel darted across the lawn, and the comforting scent of lavender from her neatly trimmed bushes offered a small sense of normalcy. Yet the unease lingered, threaded into the ordinary. It was as if the village itself were holding its breath, waiting for her to notice something only she could see. Agatha perched on the edge of her armchair, a cup of steaming tea in hand, and allowed herself a small sigh. London had been lively, bustling, and a distraction, but Carsely offered her the subtle intrigue she craved, the quiet puzzle beneath the surface of everyday life. She sipped her tea, eyes scanning the garden once more, and made a mental note. There was a visitor in the village, and that visitor had stirred something long forgotten. She would not rest until she knew who it was and what they had seen. And in a village like Carsely, every detail mattered. The Red Lion pub smelled of wood polish, faint hops, and the comforting warmth of an early evening fire. Agatha pushed the heavy door open and was greeted by the familiar jingle of the bell, the murmurs of villagers, and the soft clatter of glasses. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes adjust, and noted the subtle shifts in conversation that froze briefly as she entered. Villagers whispered in small, clustered groups, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. Something was clearly afoot, and Agatha's mind danced with possibilities, each one more tantalizing than the last. Making her way to her usual table near the hearth, she nodded politely to the landlord, Mr. Fenton, who was busy polishing the counter. "Evening, Agatha," he muttered, his tone casual, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. She smiled faintly, noting it. Every reaction, every hesitation could carry a story if observed closely enough. Settling into her chair, she ordered a pot of tea, enjoying the quiet ritual of watching the kettle steam and listening to the water ripple. Small comforts in a village rife with whispered secrets never failed to soothe her nerves, even as her curiosity pulled her deeper into the heart of the mystery. Voices shifted around her, fragments of conversation reaching her ears.
Seen the stranger yet?"
one woman whispered, her eyes darting toward a corner of the room.
"Claims to know what happened all those years ago."
Agatha sipped her tea, careful not to draw attention, and let her eyes roam. Each snippet carried meaning. Some were anxious, some defensive. A subtle undercurrent of tension threaded through even the most mundane exchanges, hinting at long-standing grievances and alliances. Her mind catalogued everything: who said what, who avoided whom, the fleeting glances that betrayed more than words ever could. Across the room, Mr. Hargreaves and Miss Linton argued quietly over the upcoming village fete, their voices low but clipped. The disagreement seemed trivial, yet Agatha sensed an undercurrent of resentment, a layer of history beneath the polite facade. Small conflicts often concealed larger truths, and she made a mental note to revisit them later. In cozy villages, small details, the placement of a chair, the tone of a word, the pause before a response, often mattered more than overt drama. And Agatha had a knack for noticing the seemingly insignificant. A hush fell over the bar as a newcomer slipped through the door, tall and inconspicuous, head bowed as if trying to escape attention. Agatha's eyes narrowed subtly. She did not approach immediately, content to watch.
Every movement, every mannerism offered clues.
The newcomer glanced toward a table near the fireplace, hesitated, then slowly moved away. Conversations resumed with murmurs that trailed off before they fully formed, leaving the room buzzing with unspoken questions. Agatha's pulse quickened, not in fear, but in delight at the puzzle unfolding around her. As she refilled her teacup, she caught a brief moment of interaction, the newcomer's hand brushing against an old photograph pinned to the wall, lingering just a heartbeat too long.
A flicker of recognition?
She made a note to explore this subtle detail later.
Agatha's mind raced, connecting threads, the whispers, the newcomer's behavior, and the hushed argument.
Her keen observation allowed her to piece together possibilities that others dismissed. Each small gesture, each overheard fragment, was a thread in the web of the village's secret. By the time she rose to leave, the pub was alive with quiet tension and hidden intrigue. The fire crackled, sending soft shadows across the room, and she smiled inwardly. The mystery of the lost witness was not fully revealed, but the first hints were undeniable. There were truths tucked between the laughter, the gossip, and the gentle clinking of teacups, truths she intended to uncover. Stepping out into the crisp evening, she felt a thrill of anticipation. Carsely's familiar charm, with all its hidden complexities, promised both comfort and intrigue, and Agatha was ready to explore every corner. Chapter 2. Clues in the Shadows. Agatha returned home that evening, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and lilac as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills. The village was quiet, bathed in the gentle hush that comes just before twilight. Her boots crunched on the gravel path leading to her gate, and she paused briefly, savouring the comforting solitude. Yet something felt different. A small envelope lay on her doorstep, half concealed beneath the twisted leaves that the wind had strewn about.
Agatha bent down, her fingers brushing the paper,
and noticed immediately that it bore no name, no signature, only a hurried scrawl that made her pulse quicken. She straightened, holding the envelope delicately. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, as if written in haste or under duress. Agatha's curiosity flared, mingled with a faint sense of caution. Sliding the envelope open, she drew out a single sheet of thick, cream-coloured paper. The message was brief but cryptic. The one you seek has seen more than anyone knows. Come alone if you wish to understand. Midnight, the old mill. No indication of who had written it, no explanation, only a whisper of danger cloaked in ambiguity. Agatha's mind began to spin. The old mill had been abandoned for years, its weathered beams and creaking floorboards the subject of countless village stories.
Why would someone summon her there?
Who was the writer? And most pressing of all, was the warning genuine or a trap? She took a deep breath, letting the familiar scent of her garden settle her nerves. Carsely was peaceful, but beneath its quaint charm, she knew, lay secrets waiting for the discerning eye. Her mind catalogued possibilities, weighing each with methodical precision. The next morning she made discreet inquiries among the villagers, testing the waters without revealing the letter. At the bakery, Mrs. Tufnell's smile faltered when Agatha mentioned the old mill. "Well, it's just an old ruin, isn't it?" she said, voice too light, eyes darting away. At the post office, Mr. Pennyweather's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his spectacles, muttering about the importance of caution. Even children, innocently inquisitive, glanced toward the lane leading to the mill as if sensing its significance. Each reaction added weight to the letter's mysterious warning and confirmed that the village held its secrets closely. By mid-afternoon, Agatha had retraced her steps in her mind, connecting the whispers she had overheard at the pub with this new development. The fragments of conversation, the newcomer, the lost witness, the subtle tension between villagers suddenly seemed to align along invisible threads. Her intuition told her that the letter was no idle prank.
It was a breadcrumb, carefully left to guide her toward the truth.
And the old mill, silent and decaying, would be the first real step into the heart of this unfolding mystery. She spent the afternoon preparing, not physically but mentally, mapping scenarios and possible outcomes. Agatha reviewed each detail she had observed, the hasty gestures of her neighbours, the furtive glances at the pub, the unspoken hints of fear threaded through the village gossip. Each element was a clue, each reaction a puzzle piece waiting to be assembled. She even noted small inconsistencies, tiny things a casual observer would miss, that might prove critical when confronting whoever had sent the letter. As evening descended, the letter rested on her table, untouched for a moment, as Agatha sat in contemplation. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp, the quiet ticking of the clock punctuating the stillness. Outside, the wind rustled through the hedges, carrying the faint scent of smoke from neighbouring chimneys. Carsely seemed to hold its breath along with her.
Agatha smiled faintly to herself, a thrill of anticipation threading through her chest.
The stage was set. The first tangible clue in her pursuit of the lost witness had arrived, and she was ready to follow it wherever it might lead. Agatha tucked the letter safely into her coat pocket and stepped outside, the chill of the late afternoon brushing against her cheeks. Her eyes scanned the familiar streets of Carsely with renewed purpose. Each corner, each lane seemed suddenly more significant, as if the village itself were conspiring to reveal its secrets. She began her slow, deliberate retracing of the lost witness's potential movements, following instinct as much as logic, her keen mind cataloguing every detail that might prove relevant later. Turning down the narrow lane behind the post office, Agatha noticed the ivy-clad wall of the old apothecary shop, long shuttered, its window dusty but faintly reflective. A glint of something metallic caught her eye near the doorstep, an old key, perhaps dropped by someone in a hurry. She stooped to examine it, a small thrill of discovery warming her chest. This, she thought, could be nothing, or it could be the first tangible thread leading her toward the hidden story the village seemed eager to keep buried. Further along, a commotion erupted near the smithy. A small goat, having escaped from a nearby pen, bolted across the path, narrowly missing Agatha's ankles. She let out a startled laugh, steadying herself against the wooden fence, while the villagers chased the frantic creature. Mr. Pennyweather, red-faced and waving his walking stick, barked instructions, and Agatha couldn't help but marvel at the quaint chaos.
Even amid the rising tension of the mystery,
Carsely's eccentric charm asserted itself, reminding her why she loved this village, and why secrets could hide so well here. She continued toward the outskirts, where cottages clustered near the river. Along the way, she noticed Mrs. Hargrove peering suspiciously from behind a lace curtain, her knitting needles pausing mid-stitch. Agatha offered a cheerful wave, which earned her a tight-lipped smile and a barely perceptible shake of the head. It was these fleeting gestures, the subtle communications of villagers aware of more than they admitted, that fascinated her. Each interaction was a puzzle piece, and her mind worked to fit them into a larger picture. Passing the old mill lane, Agatha paused, recalling the letter's cryptic instructions. Though it was still hours from midnight, she wanted to understand the lay of the land, the hidden corners and vantage points. A broken fence revealed a narrow path leading through overgrown brambles, the perfect hiding place for someone attempting to avoid notice. She crouched to examine a faint footprint pressed into the soft earth, a delicate shoe print, small and precise. Her pulse quickened. This could be a clue, or simply a coincidence, but in Carsely, nothing was ever entirely meaningless. As she followed the trail, she overheard fragments of conversations between villagers walking nearby.
"I saw someone by the river," whispered one. "I'm not sure who, but they looked
worried," said another. Agatha's ears perked up, her mind connecting these snippets to the movements she had already observed. The lost witness, it seemed, had been everywhere she now walked, leaving traces not in broad gestures, but in subtle signs, a hastily closed gate, a hurried glance, a soft murmur of worry. Every detail mattered. A soft wind rustled the leaves, carrying the faint scent of lavender and wood smoke, grounding her in the cozy familiarity of Carsely, even as her curiosity deepened. Agatha smiled at the juxtaposition, the serene village, the seemingly mundane routines, and the hidden stories threading through them all. She could feel the invisible web of the mystery tightening, guiding her closer to the heart of the puzzle, while the occasional slapstick encounter, the goat, the bemused villagers, kept her journey both suspenseful and delightfully human. By the time she returned to the main street,
Agatha's mind buzzed with potential connection.
Clues accumulated, both trivial and telling, forming an intricate tapestry of observation and deduction. Each step, each laugh, each subtle gesture brought her nearer to understanding the lost witness's story. Carsely, with all its gentle eccentricities and concealed tensions, had revealed itself as both friend and enigma, and Agatha was determined to follow every thread wherever it might lead. Chapter 3. Secrets Among Friends. Agatha spent the morning arranging a modest tea in her sitting room, the kettle humming softly, and the aroma of freshly baked scones mingling with the scent of lavender from the window box. She had invited a handful of villagers under the pretense of a casual gathering, though in truth she intended to observe, question, and unravel the tangled threads surrounding the lost witness. Her silver teapot gleamed under the morning light, and her collection of delicate china sat neatly on the tray, a comforting contrast to the tension she anticipated. As the first guests arrived, The room filled with murmured greetings and the soft clinking of cups. Mrs. Hargrove was the first to settle, fanning herself and glancing furtively at the doorway as if measuring the arrival of each new attendee. Mr. Pennyweather followed, stiff and formal, carefully placing his hat on a chair before settling down with a polite nod. Agatha watched each gesture, each subtle shift in posture, cataloguing what was said, and more importantly, what was not. In the quiet pauses, truths often whispered louder than words. The conversation began with trivialities, the weather, the progress of the village flower beds, and the upcoming bake sale. But Agatha steered gently, her questions light but deliberate.
"Have any of you noticed anything unusual lately?"
she asked casually, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. Mrs. Hargrove exchanged a glance with Mr. Pennyweather, and their response came hesitantly, a careful dance of words. "Well, there are always stories, aren't there?" she said, her tone almost defensive.
Agatha's lips twitched into a knowing smile.
She could sense the reluctance, the hidden discomfort behind their polite phrasing. Soon, fragments of information emerged, though contradictory and often incomplete. Mrs. Hargrove claimed to have seen a figure near the river early last week, someone moving quickly, almost furtively. Mr. Pennyweather insisted it was near the old mill instead, a different time entirely. The inconsistencies were subtle yet telling. Agatha's sharp mind noted every detail, cross-referencing it with her own observations and the clues from the letter. Something was being deliberately obscured, though she could not yet say by whom or why. Amid the tension, small village dramas surfaced, adding depth and texture to the gathering. Miss Linton's barely concealed rivalry with Mrs. Hargrove bubbled to the surface in pointed comments about the quality of scones and the placement of sugar bowls. A hint of a long-forgotten affair emerged, whispered as a passing observation from Mr. Hargreaves about late-night visits and mysterious comings and goings. Agatha absorbed it all with quiet amusement, appreciating the intricate web of personal history that both concealed and revealed the truth. Her questions remained gentle, unobtrusive, coaxing information without direct confrontation.
"Curious, isn't it?" she remarked. "How sometimes the smallest details tell the largest story."
The guests nodded, some more willingly than others, revealing glimpses of character, motive, and hidden fears.
Agatha's keen eyes noted who avoided eye contact, who lingered too long over polite phrases, and who unconsciously contradicted themselves.
Every discrepancy was a thread waiting to be pulled, and she was patient, letting the narrative unwind at its own pace. By mid-afternoon, the gathering had provided a wealth of subtle clues, hints of the lost witness's movements, whispers of past grievances, and the soft layering of deception beneath the village's polite surface.
Agatha poured herself another cup of tea, savouring both the warmth and the thrill of discovery.
She felt the familiar satisfaction of connecting dots others failed to see, the gentle amusement of observing human nature in its most intricate form. The tea concluded with polite farewells, but the seeds of revelation had been planted, leaving Agatha with a richer, more complex map of the village's hidden truths. As the last guest departed, she stood by the window, gazing out at the neatly trimmed hedges and sun-dappled streets. Carsely seemed serene, almost ordinary, yet beneath its surface, currents of secrets and intrigue swirled. Agatha's mind was already at work, piecing together the conflicting accounts, anticipating the next step in her quiet, relentless pursuit of the lost witness. The afternoon had been more than tea. It had been a masterclass in observation, and she was ready for the threads to unravel further. Agatha wandered through her garden that afternoon, the soft sunlight spilling over the neatly trimmed lavender and rose bushes. She found comfort in the familiar scents, the earthy aroma of damp soil, the faint sweetness of flowers in bloom, but her mind was alert, turning over every detail from her recent conversations. The village seemed deceptively calm, yet beneath the serenity, currents of unease lingered. As she bent to adjust a stray ribbon of ivy on the garden gate, her sharp eyes caught something unusual at the base of the hedge, a small, folded scrap of paper, partially concealed by fallen leaves. Carefully, she picked it up, noting the texture and the faint smudge of dirt along the edges. The handwriting was delicate, precise, almost careful, though slightly faded, as if it had been there for some time.
Agatha's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation.
This could be a trivial note left by a forgetful gardener, or it could be the first tangible link between the lost witness and the old, unresolved crime that had stirred the village into whispers. She slipped the paper into her palm, keeping it hidden behind the folds of her cardigan, careful that no one passing by would notice. She retreated to a shaded corner of the garden, crouching behind a tall hedge to examine the contents. The words were cryptic, offering only hints. "Meet near the willow at dusk. Watch for the sign of 3. There was no signature, no overt clue to the sender's identity, but the phrasing suggested urgency and discretion.
Agatha's mind raced, recalling every recent conversation, every small inconsistency she had noticed at the tea, at the pub, and on her walks through the village.
Connections began forming, faint and tentative, like threads weaving into a complex tapestry. From her concealed vantage point, she observed the garden path and the adjacent lane. Neighbours went about their routines, none pausing to notice her crouched figure. Even Mrs. Hargrove, carrying a basket of herbs to her kitchen window, glanced only briefly in Agatha's direction before moving along, unaware of the discovery she had just made. Agatha allowed herself a small, private smile. Timing and secrecy were everything. She could afford to wait, to observe, to ensure that this piece of evidence revealed its significance gradually, without alarming those who might be invested in keeping it hidden. She turned the scrap over in her hands, noting faint smudges that hinted at hurried handling or perhaps nervous fingers. The suggestion of a meeting near the willow stirred her imagination. Who would be there, and why? The sign of 3 was tantalizingly ambiguous, a subtle riddle to be unravelled later. Agatha's thoughts darted back to the lost witness, the fragments of stories, and the cryptic letter she had received earlier. Each element now seemed to overlap, converging toward a revelation she could almost touch, but not yet fully grasp. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, Agatha carefully replaced the paper in the folds of her cardigan. She stood slowly, brushing leaves from her skirt and straightening her coat. The ordinary garden, so familiar in its calm beauty, now felt layered with hidden meaning. Every flower, every path, seemed to conceal stories, waiting for an observant eye to notice. Agatha felt the thrill of discovery and the subtle tension of secrecy mingling, a heady combination that always invigorated her investigative instincts. Before she retreated indoors, she glanced once more along the hedge and down the lane. No one had noticed her, and the evidence remained hers alone, a private key to the next stage of her investigation. Agatha allowed herself a quiet nod, a promise to herself that she would follow this lead with care and patience. The village was alive with hidden narratives, and she had just uncovered one of the most intriguing threads. Carsely's charm, once comforting, now carried an added dimension, intrigue waiting quietly beneath its surface, just beyond the reach of the casual observer. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. Agatha's fingers hovered over a stack of dusty books in the corner of the village library, the soft afternoon light streaming through tall, narrow windows. Her eyes, ever curious, caught the spine of a worn, leather-bound journal that seemed to have been forgotten for decades. The cover was scuffed, the edges frayed, and a faint, musty aroma of age drifted upward as she pulled it free. She settled into a quiet nook by the window, the journal cradled in her hands, and allowed herself a small thrill. It was the sort of discovery she lived for, an untouched record of thoughts, fears, and secrets waiting to be read. Opening the first page, she found neat handwriting fading with time, each entry dated meticulously. The journal belonged to a villager she knew in passing, someone seemingly ordinary but now revealed in a new light.
Agatha's eyes moved carefully over the line,
absorbing the descriptions of events long past, whispered disagreements, subtle betrayals, and rivalries that had simmered quietly beneath the village's tranquil surface. Names were occasionally left blank, replaced by initials or cryptic phrases inviting interpretation and speculation. Already, the quiet, familiar village streets of Carsely seemed layered with hidden meaning. A particular entry caught her attention. It described a nighttime argument near the old mill involving a confrontation that had never been spoken of publicly. Words of anger, fear, and misunderstanding were recorded with the careful precision of someone anxious about memory and legacy.
Agatha felt a shiver of anticipation.
Here was a glimpse into the past that aligned with the fragments she had collected, the letters, the whispers, the sudden appearances of a mysterious figure. The pieces were beginning to feel less random, more intentional, as if the village itself were nudging her toward a revelation. She lingered over another entry, this one recounting a secret meeting under the willow by the river. The writer spoke of tension among friends, promises broken and loyalty tested. Agatha's mind traced the lines between the journal and her recent observations, the cryptic letter, the scrap of paper in her garden, the differing accounts at her tea-gathering. Each discovery echoed the last, forming a layered narrative of hidden motives and unspoken agreements. Even the smallest details, a description of a misplaced brooch, a forgotten phrase, seemed significant, potential keys to understanding the lost witness's elusive story. The journal also hinted at small, personal dramas, a flirtation gone awry, a debt unpaid, a whispered insult that festered into years of quiet resentment. Agatha allowed herself a soft smile at the vividness of human nature captured on the pages. The village, she realized, was not merely a collection of quaint cottages and familiar faces. It was a living archive of choices, regrets, and secrets. By understanding these nuances, she could trace the invisible lines connecting past to present, the mundane to the consequential, and perhaps uncover the truth that had eluded everyone else. Closing the journal for a moment, Agatha gazed out at the streets below, the late sunlight casting gentle shadows across the cobblestones. The familiar village scene, so cozy and unassuming, now seemed infused with layers of tension and possibility. She felt the delicate balance between comfort and intrigue, warmth and suspense that defined Carsely so well. With the journal as a guide, she began to map the scope of the mystery in her mind, connecting the visible world to the hidden currents of the past. Every page turned revealed more than words. It revealed character, motive, and a sense of urgency that whispered of truths yet to surface. Agatha leaned back, a thoughtful expression settling over her face. The puzzle was becoming clearer, the threads of the lost witness's story weaving through the fabric of the village's history, yet still tantalizingly incomplete. And in that quiet library corner, she felt a surge of anticipation, eager to trace each thread, untangle each secret, and follow the story wherever it might lead. The evening air was crisp as Agatha made her way home. The streets of Carsely, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and the fading warmth of a sun that had long since dipped behind the hills. Leaves rustled beneath her feet, and the faint scent of wood smoke drifted from nearby chimneys. Yet, beneath the familiar comfort of her village, a prickling sensation ran along her spine, an almost imperceptible awareness that she was being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift with intent, every flicker of movement at the corner of her eye more pronounced than usual. Reaching her gate, she paused, glancing over her shoulder. Nothing, just the ordinary quiet of evening settling over the village. But instinct, honed by years of observation, told her that ordinary appearances could be deceptive. She pushed open the door to her cottage and stepped inside, the soft creak of floorboards marking her entrance. For a moment, the comforting smell of lavender and freshly brewed tea reassured her. Yet the tension lingered, like a low hum beneath the surface of her awareness. It was only as she set down her handbag that she noticed a small envelope, folded neatly and tucked under the edge of her doormat.
Agatha bent to retrieve it, noting the subtle difference in weight and texture from her previous discoveries.
The paper felt heavier, more deliberate, as if the writer had intended to convey something weighty without saying it outright. Sliding it open, she read the single line carefully, letting the words settle. "Stop looking, or you will regret it." No signature, no context, only the blunt threat, stark against the cozy familiarity of her home. Her pulse quickened, but she did not panic. Agatha was accustomed to subtle intimidation. This was a reminder that someone was aware of her investigations. She studied the envelope again, noting a faint smudge near the corner and a crease that suggested hurried handling. The message was menacing, but the handwriting itself spoke volumes. Careful, controlled, a person attempting to assert dominance without direct confrontation. Her mind catalogued the possibilities. Who in the village could have the motive, the knowledge, and the nerve to deliver such a warning? Even as the danger hinted at by the note settled into her awareness, Agatha's thoughts turned to the villagers she had observed that day. Mrs. Hargrove's quick glances, Mr. Pennyweather's unusually tight-lipped replies, and the newcomer she had glimpsed near the river, all merged into a cloud of possibilities. Any of them might be harmless, and any might have reasons to want her investigation to cease. Suspicion was inevitable, but so was her determination. Threats did not deter her. They sharpened her resolve. Setting the note aside, Agatha made a point of maintaining her usual calm. She brewed a fresh pot of tea, the familiar ritual soothing her nerves and grounding her in the comforting rhythms of village life. Outside, Carsely remained serene, its cobblestones gleaming in the lantern light, hedges neatly trimmed and windows glowing warmly. Yet beneath that tranquility, the knowledge of unseen eyes and deliberate warning stirred a subtle tension. Agatha sipped her tea with a quiet smile, her mind already planning the next steps in her investigation. The village held its secrets close, but she was more determined than ever to uncover them, and no anonymous threat would change that resolve. Chapter 5. Tangled Threads. Agatha settled into her armchair by the window, a steaming cup of tea balanced carefully in one hand and her notebook in the other. The late afternoon sunlight spilled across the pages, illuminating scribbled notes, sketches of the village streets, and fragments of overheard conversations. She leaned back, eyes scanning the garden beyond the glass, letting the gentle sway of branches soothe her, while her mind sifted through the tangled threads of information she had gathered. Each detail, no matter how trivial it had seemed at the time, was a potential key, a puzzle piece waiting to fit. She reviewed the clues systematically. The cryptic letter summoning her to the old mill, the scrap of paper hidden in her garden, the contrasting accounts from the tea gathering, and the entries from the forgotten journal all formed a network of subtle connections. Patterns emerged, yet inconsistencies stubbornly resisted resolution. Agatha smiled at herself, amused by the challenge. The village's charm lay not only in its hedgerows and cobblestones, but also in its human complexities, rivalries, jealousies, and quirks that obscured truth beneath layers of civility. Retracing her mental steps, she recalled the pub that had been alive with whispered rumours and half-told stories. Mr. Pennyweather's stiff demeanour, Mrs. Hargrove's careful evasions, and the fleeting presence of the newcomer all merged into a tableau of cautious secrecy. Agatha imagined the same scenes from different perspectives, probing for contradictions or overlooked details. A creased napkin here, a hand gesture there, seemed inconsequential on the surface, yet she had learned to trust her instinct. Nothing in Carsely happened by accident. Even the humorous obstacles she had encountered, the runaway goat, the frantic scramble of villagers, offered subtle insights. Patterns of behavior emerged from these small disruptions. Who panicked first, who tried to maintain appearances, who laughed nervously to deflect attention. Agatha jotted these observations in the margin of her notebook, the ink forming a web of interconnected clues. She allowed herself a small chuckle. amused at how human folly often left more evidence than careful planning ever could. Her mind wandered briefly to the garden path and the hidden scrap of paper, now carefully preserved. She traced the line from that discovery to the cryptic instructions in the letter, imagining the possible movements of the lost witness. Shadows and light, quiet corners of hedges, and the faintest marks on paths all played a role. Agatha visualized these locations, cross-referencing them with the journal's accounts and the villagers' evasive behaviors. The picture was still incomplete, but she could sense the pattern emerging, teasing at the edges of comprehension. By evening, the sun had lowered, casting long, golden shadows across her sitting room. Agatha set the notebook aside, stretching and savoring the small satisfaction of progress. Each clue collected, each observation noted, had brought her closer to understanding the story hidden beneath Carsely's idyllic surface. The tangled threads were gradually untwining, and she could feel the first outlines of the pivotal revelation beginning to form. Cozy village life, with all its eccentricities and understated intrigue, had offered her a labyrinth of subtle truths, and she was more than ready to navigate it to its conclusion. Agatha had barely settled into her armchair with a second cup of tea when there came a soft knock at the door. She looked up to see Miss Linton standing hesitantly on the threshold, her hands twisted nervously in front of her. The young woman's usual composure seemed frayed, and Agatha, ever perceptive, sensed that something significant had brought her here. "Come in, my dear," Agatha said warmly, motioning toward the cosy sitting room. "You look as though you have a story to tell." Miss Linton's eyes flickered to the notebook on the table and back to Agatha. After a moment, she stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. The soft glow of the lamp cast gentle shadows across the room, giving the moment an intimacy that invited honesty. I think you should know," she began, her voice low, almost tremulous.
"It's about—"
"The lost witness." Agatha leaned forward, setting her cup aside, her mind sharpening. Every word, every pause was a clue, and she listened with the patience of someone who had spent years unraveling secrets. "I didn't see much myself," Miss Linton admitted, wringing her hands, "but I overheard something last week near the river. A visitor, a stranger, was talking to Mr. Hargreaves, whispering in hurried tones.
I didn't understand what it meant at the time, and I wasn't sure if I should say anything.
But now," she trailed off, her gaze dropping.
Agatha nodded gently, encouraging her to continue without pressure.
There was courage in confession, even when filtered through fear and uncertainty, and Agatha knew that sometimes the smallest revelations carried the greatest weight. Miss Linton hesitated, then added, "They were speaking about someone who had seen something years ago, something that happened near the old mill."
I can't remember exactly, but it sounded serious. I thought it was just gossip, but maybe it's not. Agatha's mind raced, piecing the statement together with the letters, the journal, and the scraps of paper she had found.
The visitor Miss Linton had seen could very well be the lost witness, the elusive figure whose presence had stirred the village into quiet speculation. "You've done the right thing," Agatha said, her tone both reassuring and sharp. "What you overheard may be the confirmation we need, even if it seems fragmentary." "Every detail matters," Miss Linton nodded, relief and apprehension mingling in her expression. Agatha observed her closely, noting the subtle tension in her shoulders, the quick glance toward the window as if wondering who else might be watching. In Carsely, secrecy had long been a language, and trust a fragile gift. As the confession settled in the room, Agatha sipped her tea thoughtfully. The village, with its gentle charm and cozy routines, now held an added layer of complexity. A new thread had been revealed, one that connected past events to the present and hinted at truths still hidden beneath the surface. Agatha's mind worked steadily, anticipating the implications and planning her next moves. Miss Linton's courage had opened a door, and Agatha knew that following it could bring them both closer to unraveling the story of the lost witness while keeping the village's delicate equilibrium intact. Chapter 6. unmasking the mystery. Agatha arrived at the edge of the village green just as the afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the cobblestones. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring among themselves, each face a mixture of curiosity, relief, and barely contained gossip. At the centre stood a figure she had seen only fleetingly, a tall, slightly stooped individual, cloaked against the breeze, their face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Agatha's sharp eyes immediately catalogued posture, clothing, and small gestures. This was the lost witness, finally stepping from the shadows into the light of Carsely. The moment was charged with quiet anticipation. Villagers whispered among themselves, some craning to catch a glimpse, while children peeked from behind fence posts, sensing the gravity in adult tension. Agatha approached slowly, her presence calm and assured, her mind already calculating the best way to draw out information without alarming the witness. "Good afternoon," she said gently, inclining her head. "I believe you have something to share with us. Something the village has been waiting to hear." Her tone invited trust, yet commanded attention, the precise balance she had perfected over many investigations. The witness's hands trembled slightly as they removed their hat, revealing a lined, expressive face, eyes bright with intelligence and cautious urgency. "Yes," they began, voice steady but careful. "I saw what happened all those years ago. I wasn't brave enough to speak before, but the time has come." Agatha gestured toward a nearby bench, and the witness settled, speaking in measured tones. Slowly, the story unfolded, a tangled web of minor crimes, secret alliances, and misunderstandings that had grown in silence over the years. Each revelation carried weight, but Agatha's keen mind noticed the subtleties, what was emphasized, what was glossed over, and what remained unsaid. As the witness spoke, the villagers reacted with a mix of shock and relief. Mrs. Hargrove gasped softly, covering her mouth with a handkerchief, while Mr. Pennyweather's eyes widened, his usual composure fractured. Even the newcomer observed with quiet intensity, nodding slightly at key points, confirming some suspicions without revealing more than necessary. Agatha interjected occasionally, gently probing with questions that clarified motives, timelines, and sequences of events. Her inquiries were precise yet considerate, encouraging the witness to elaborate without feeling pressured, and allowing the crowd to absorb the revelations gradually. Despite the gravity of the disclosures, the village's familiar charm softened the moment. Children wandered closer, fascinated by the assembly, while the scent of freshly baked bread from nearby kitchens reminded everyone of the comforting routines that underpinned village life. Laughter bubbled briefly from a group of friends, recalling minor comic misunderstandings connected to the witness's story. These light-hearted interludes provided relief, balancing the tension with cozy familiarity and highlighting the resilience and warmth of Carsely's community. By the time the witness finished, a clear picture had emerged, though minor ambiguities remained, tantalizing the imagination. Agatha's mind raced with connections, letters, scraps of paper, journal entries, and overheard conversations now made sense within a broader narrative. She stood, offering a reassuring nod to the witness, acknowledging both the courage required and the truth finally brought to light. The villagers, while digesting the revelations, whispered amongst themselves, some exchanging quiet smiles of relief, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Carsely had, at last, begun to reconcile the shadows of its past with the comforting routines of its present. Agatha, satisfied yet already considering the next steps, felt a warm sense of accomplishment. The lost witness had appeared, the puzzle had shifted into clearer focus, and the village, with all its quirks and charms, was slowly beginning to breathe easier. The blend of suspense, revelation, and cozy community restored the balance she so cherished, leaving room for the final threads of the mystery to be unraveled. Agatha gathered the villagers in her sitting room, the familiar warmth of her cottage wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and the aroma of freshly baked scones mingled with the lingering scent of tea. All eyes were on her, expectant, curious, and slightly apprehensive. She smiled, sensing the perfect balance between gravity and coziness, the moment to untangle the village's recent threads and offer clarity without diminishing the charm of Carsely. "Now," she began, settling into her favorite armchair, "let us see if we can make sense of all that has transpired." She gestured toward the array of papers, letters and notes she had collected. Her eyes twinkled with amusement as she recalled the quirky mishaps, the whispered gossip, and the minor diversions that had punctuated her investigation. The villagers leaned in, some fidgeting, others perched on the edges of their chairs, waiting to hear the story woven together.
Agatha thrived in space where curiosity met clarity,
And tension melted into understanding. She recounted the arrival of the lost witness, framing their sudden appearance as the key to untangling the village's hidden past. Carefully, she outlined the cryptic letters, the scraps of paper, and the journal entries, emphasizing how each detail, small, overlooked, or seemingly trivial, played a role in the puzzle. "Notice how each action, each glance, each hesitation has been a clue," she explained, her voice both authoritative and inviting. The villagers nodded, some with surprise, others with sheepish recognition, as their own behaviors and observations were gently reframed within the narrative Agatha had pieced together. With a practiced flourish, she connected long-forgotten rivalries and whispered disagreements to the sequence of events surrounding the old mill. She highlighted coincidences that had appeared random but were in fact subtle alignments of human behavior, timing, and circumstance. "It is remarkable," she noted with a small smile, "how even the smallest gestures, an avoided glance or a whispered word, can ripple outward, shaping outcomes far beyond their immediate appearance." The crowd murmured in appreciation, some chuckling at the humorous minor misunderstandings that had contributed to the confusion. Agatha paused, allowing the villagers to absorb the picture forming before them. She emphasized motives without judgment, illuminating hidden fears, ambitions, and loyalties. Mrs. Hargrove's protective secrecy, Mr. Pennyweather's careful diplomacy, and Miss Linton's courageous observations all found their place within the narrative. The witness's story, once fragmented, now had coherence, framed by both evidence and human nuance. Agatha's wit punctuated the explanation, drawing gentle laughter and softening moments of tension with playful observations about village quirks. By the time she concluded, the villagers were both satisfied and entertained, their questions answered, yet their imaginations gently teased by minor ambiguities left intentionally unresolved.
Agatha leaned back, savouring the moment of resolution, the soft hum of conversation, and the comforting glow of the firelight.
Carsely had regained its equilibrium, the mystery clarified, the tension eased, and the charm of the village reaffirmed. And in that balance between revelation and warmth,
Agatha allowed herself a small private smile,
knowing that the puzzle had been solved, and that the village, with all its eccentricities, would continue to thrive beautifully, quietly and mysteriously. Chapter 7: Consequences and Confessions. Agatha walked briskly through the village square, her mind focused yet alert to the nuances of human behavior around her. The cobblestones glimmered faintly under the afternoon sun, and the gentle murmur of the village was punctuated by the occasional clatter of a cartwheel or the soft cooing of doves from the church tower. Today, however, the familiar charm of Carsely carried a heightened tension, a sense that something pivotal was about to unfold.
Agatha had gathered all the threads of her investigation,
and knew precisely where they led, toward the individual responsible for the long-forgotten misdeed that had quietly haunted the village. She approached the central tea shop, a cozy establishment fragrant with freshly baked pastries and the faint tang of strong tea. Inside, several villagers had already gathered, their conversations hushed, curiosity piqued. Mrs. Hargrove hovered near the counter, nervously adjusting her scarf, while Mr. Pennyweather perched on a chair, stiff and formal, scanning the room with quiet suspicion. Agatha's eyes, sharp as ever, sought out the person she intended to confront, a figure who had maintained careful composure through the past weeks, but whose subtle gestures now betrayed tension. "Good afternoon."
"Everyone," Agatha began, her voice warm yet commanding attention.
She moved with deliberate calm, setting a tray of biscuits on a nearby table and pouring herself a cup of tea. "It seems we have gathered not only for refreshments, but also to address a small but significant matter from the past." The room grew still. Murmurs faded, and all eyes turned toward her, anticipation and apprehension mingling in the air. Agatha allowed a brief pause, letting the suspense build, before continuing with the practiced grace that had so often revealed truths without conflict. She addressed the individual directly, choosing her words with both tact and subtle humor.
"I believe you know precisely the incident to which I refer," she said, raising an eyebrow lightly.
The figure, pale but composed, met her gaze, nodding slightly as if acknowledging an unspoken understanding. Agatha's keen observations noted every flicker of emotion, a tightening jaw, a brief glance toward the window, a hand resting uneasily on a cup handle. She pressed gently, inviting confession without accusation, allowing dignity to remain intact even as truth emerged. The admission came quietly but fully. The culprit recounted their role in the events long ago, explaining motives, misjudgments, and lingering regrets.
Agatha listened intently, nodding, asking clarifying questions, and framing each revelation in a way that illuminated the complexity of human behavior rather than simply casting blame.
The villagers absorbed the confession, their expressions a mix of shock, admiration, and the quiet thrill of gossip. Even the soft clatter of teacups did little to diminish the gravity of the moment, though occasional smiles and small chuckles punctuated the tension, reminding everyone that life in Carsely was rarely without its charm. Once the confession concluded, Agatha allowed space for reflection. Apologies were exchanged, understanding tentatively extended, and lessons quietly acknowledged. The village's cozy environment softened the weight of guilt and confrontation, allowing resolution to emerge naturally. Children peeked curiously from the doorway, while adults whispered among themselves, replaying details and teasing out subtleties. Agatha, satisfied with the clarity achieved and the dignity preserved, took a final sip of tea and smiled inwardly. Justice, tempered with empathy and a dash of wit, had been served. The balance between revelation and warmth restored the rhythm of village life. Carsely, with its hedgerows, cobblestones, and eccentric residents, seemed once again to breathe comfortably, its secrets partially unveiled, but its charm wholly intact. Agatha, quietly pleased, noted the subtle lessons learned about human nature, curiosity, and the delicate art of navigating truth in a small, observant community. Today had been one step closer to full resolution, and the village, as always, remained alive with quiet intrigue. The next morning, Carsely seemed to breathe a little easier. Sunlight spilled over the cobblestones, warming the walls of cottages and glinting off neatly trimmed hedgerows. The village was calm, its usual rhythm restored, yet an undercurrent of amusement and gentle curiosity lingered.
Agatha, ever attuned to the subtle shifts of mood,
decided it was the perfect day to host a celebratory tea, both as a reward for herself and a way to reconnect the villagers. After the recent revelations, her sitting room was transformed into a cozy haven of pastel tablecloths, gleaming teacups, and plates piled high with freshly baked scones, jam, and clotted cream. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, its warmth mingling with the aroma of herbs and tea. Villagers arrived in trickles, their expressions a blend of relief, curiosity, and anticipation. Mrs. Hargrove fussed over the arrangements with a mixture of pride and mild anxiety, while Mr. Pennyweather attempted to look dignified, yet couldn't hide a smile at the abundance of pastries. Even the children hovered near the doorway, wide-eyed at the promise of treats and laughter. Agatha welcomed each guest with her signature warmth, offering witty observations that drew soft laughter and lightened lingering tension. She recounted small, humorous anecdotes from the past weeks, the runaway goat, minor misunderstandings, and the occasional dramatic glance or whispered comment, reminding everyone that even the weightiest mysteries could be softened by human folly. The villagers chuckled, some shaking their heads in embarrassment, others sharing knowing glances, appreciating both the humor and the gentle reconciliation of events. Conversations flowed easily, blending gossip, observations, and heartfelt acknowledgments. Old grievances were acknowledged with good-natured winks, while apologies were exchanged in subtle, unspoken ways. Agatha noticed Mrs. Hargreaves handing a small note of thanks to the witness who had revealed crucial information, and Mr. Pennyweather quietly assisting a neighbor with a chair, small acts of kindness signaling that harmony was being restored. Laughter and chatter wove through the room, a comforting tapestry of human connection that reminded everyone of Carsely's enduring charm. Amid the merriment, Agatha allowed herself a private smile, noting how the village's quirks, each eccentricity, each idiosyncrasy, had contributed to both the mystery and its resolution. The tangled threads of suspicion and secrecy had been unraveled, but enough intrigue remained to spark curiosity and conversation for weeks to come. She sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her, a simple pleasure echoing the satisfaction of a puzzle well solved. By the time the afternoon sun dipped lower, the sitting room was filled with contented chatter, gentle laughter, and the occasional teasing remark. Carsely had returned to its comforting rhythm, a village that had faced hidden truths and emerged stronger, its residents closer for the shared experiences. Agatha, quietly satisfied, surveyed the scene, a mix of humor, warmth, and resolution perfectly balanced, a testament to human nature and the enduring charm of a village where mysteries and friendship intertwined seamlessly. Chapter 8. Reflections and New Beginnings. The evening settled gently over Carsely, painting the village in soft shades of amber and gold. Agatha sat in her garden, a steaming cup of tea warming her hands, while the last rays of the sun filtered through the branches of her apple trees. The scent of roses mingled with the faint aroma of wood smoke from nearby chimneys, and a gentle breeze rustled the hedgerows, carrying whispers of distant conversation from the cottages beyond. She leaned back in her chair, letting the familiar tranquility of her surroundings envelop her. It had been a week of revelations, confessions, and unexpected resolutions. The lost witness had come forward, secrets had been untangled, and the village had begun to reclaim its peaceful rhythm. Yet even in the calm, Agatha's mind remained alert, observing the subtle movements of neighbors walking along the cobblestone streets, the distant laughter of children playing near the fountain, and the curious glance of a stranger passing by. Carsely was alive with quiet stories, and she had learned that even the most serene villages held threads of mystery beneath the surface. She sipped her tea and smiled at the memory of recent events, the runaway goat, Mrs. Hargrove's flustered attempts to maintain decorum, and Mr. Pennyweather's surprisingly amusing attempts at diplomacy. Life, she mused, was a delicate balance of humor, human error, and moments of insight. Even the tension and suspense of the past weeks had carried a certain charm, a reminder that curiosity and courage often led to unexpected discoveries. Agatha allowed herself a quiet laugh, imagining how the villagers might recount the story over tea for weeks to come, embellishing small details for amusement and dramatic effect. Her gaze drifted across the garden, noting tiny signs of life, the cat winding lazily between flower pots, the last petals of lavender swaying in the evening air, and a pair of birds perched silently on a fence. Each detail grounded her, a gentle reminder that life in Carsely continued with its subtle rhythms and enduring charm. She reflected on her own role, the delicate art of observation, and the pleasure of connecting the dots in a web of human behavior and hidden motives. There was satisfaction in understanding, yet always the acknowledgement that mysteries never fully disappeared. They simply awaited the right observer to notice them. As the sky deepened into soft shades of twilight, Agatha allowed herself a final contemplative sip of tea. The village, she realized, had returned to its cozy, familiar rhythm, but the undercurrent of curiosity, of small, unfolding stories, remained. Somewhere, quietly, new questions would arise, small puzzles would whisper themselves into existence, and her role as observer, thinker, and occasional instigator of clarity would continue. She leaned back, resting her chin on her hand, and let the evening settle around her. Peace, laughter, reflection, and a hint of intrigue. It was all part of life in Carsely, and she wouldn't have it any other way. The night had deepened over Carsely, wrapping the village in a calm blanket of stars. Street lamps cast golden pools of light on the cobblestones, and the gentle rustle of leaves whispered through the hedgerows. Agatha lingered on her garden bench, savouring the lingering warmth of her teacup in hand, and the quiet satisfaction of a day that had unfolded without incident. The village had settled into its usual rhythm, residents retreating to their homes, doors closed against the cool evening. Yet a subtle energy hummed beneath the surface, a reminder that even in tranquility, curiosity never truly sleeps. As she surveyed the garden, Agatha's sharp eyes caught something unusual near the far hedge, a small, folded piece of paper partially concealed beneath a fallen branch. She reached for it with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. The envelope was unmarked, unlike any of the previous letters she had received. Its presence hinted at something yet to unfold, a quiet signal that the stories of Carsely were far from complete. She held it delicately, aware that the smallest discoveries often led to the largest revelations. Returning to her cottage, she set the envelope on the table beside her notebook, the firelight flickering across its surface. Agatha's mind began to turn over possibilities. Who might have left it, and why? Perhaps a visitor from another village, a traveller with a secret observation, or even a villager emboldened by recent events. The note's origin was a puzzle in itself, teasing at connections that were not immediately clear. She could imagine the theories already forming in the minds of neighbours, and the thought brought a quiet smile to her lips. Outside, the village remained serene. A fox slinked past the edge of the green, pausing briefly to regard the distant lights, while a pair of owls called softly from the churchyard. Agatha watched it all with a keen sense of enjoyment, noting that the familiar rhythms of village life were punctuated by subtle anomalies, the tiniest hints that kept her attention alive. Even a village as seemingly ordinary as Carsely could conceal intrigue in the most mundane corners. A misplaced tool, an unusual shadow, or, in this case, a mysterious envelope left at precisely the right angle to catch her notice. She carefully unfolded the paper, revealing a brief cryptic message. "Look closer where the past lingers. Answers wait where least expected." Agatha's eyes twinkled with quiet delight. The note was deliberately vague, offering no immediate resolution. Yet its phrasing carried the same promise that had always drawn her into investigation. Curiosity, observation, and the thrill of discovery. She could feel the stirrings of anticipation, the subtle pull of a new mystery waiting to unfold, without disturbing the sense of closure she had worked to achieve. Sitting back in her chair, Agatha allowed herself a moment to savour both accomplishment and possibility. Carsely remained warm, comforting, and familiar, but the envelope reminded her, and the villagers, that life never truly pauses. There were always questions to ask, secrets to uncover, and small, delightful mysteries tucked into the corners of everyday existence. She looked out once more at the twinkling village lights, a gentle smile on her face, and felt the familiar thrill of curiosity mingled with contentment. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring its own discoveries, and when it did, she would be ready, notebook in hand, keen eyes alert, and her characteristic wit at the ready. Carsely, in all its charm and quiet intrigue, would continue to offer stories to be unravelled, puzzles to solve, and moments of warmth to savour. And for Agatha Raisin, that was exactly how she liked it, an ever-unfolding tapestry of mystery, humour, and human connection, waiting patiently for the next question to be asked.